So, what to make of this seeming chumminess between the Clinton campaign and certain members of the press corps? Joining me is Tucker Carlson, co-host of Fox News Weekend. Tucker, you've had a chance to look at these things. What do you make of them?
Well, they're shocking. I would say a couple of things. I sent a bunch of reporters out today to get comment from the various news organizations involved in this.
Oh, tell us
in the
about
majority
what you got.
of cases, we got a no comment. Now, think about that. What would be the justification for a news organization whose whole mission is predicated on the idea of openness, of an open flow of information, of honesty, to say no comment? We're just not going to respond. We don't have to, and we're not going to. That was their response. And the reason they're not responding, I think, is because this is, let's call it plainly, this is corruption. This is collusion between the principals and the people who are supposed to be watching over them, the watchdogs, the press, and doing so on our behalf, that is, readers and viewers. We imagine, we the consumers out there in the rest of the world, that they are working on our behalf to get answers on our behalf from people in whom we vested power and money, government. And yet we're now finding that they are, in fact, colluding. In some cases, as with John Harwood, he was giving campaign advice to the chairman of Hillary Clinton's campaign, John Podesta, who's saying, you know, that Ben Carson, you should watch out for him. In another case,
yeah, there was a warning, wasn't there?
That's exactly right.
He warned them about Ben Carson being a potentially strong candidate.
Yes. In another case, he basically expressed revulsion at Donald Trump and said, in effect, I'm glad that I was so tough on him in the debate. Now, he was one of the moderators of one of the Republican debates, and as you'll recall, it was controversial because he seemed to be singling out Trump for tough and what some people said was unfair treatment. And his response was, look, I'm a reporter. I'm asking tough questions, which is, of course, what we're supposed to be doing. It turns out here he is gloating with the chairman of the campaign of Trump's opponent, saying, you know, I'm glad I treated him that way. Really? Look, journalism is predicated on trust, just as the financial markets are predicated on trust. All of us participate in it believing it's on the level. It's straight. Insider trading undermines the financial markets. That's why it's illegal. This undermines the public's trust in journalism. It hurts all of us, and it makes our society more unstable. If you can't believe what you see on the news or read in a paper, you'll believe anything.
You know, it's not unusual, in my experience, Tucker, for journalists to develop friendly relationships with the people we cover, or particularly with the aides to people we cover. You see them all the time. You've known them for many years. You may tell jokes with them. You may have a beer with them.
Yes.
But I don't think it's common to write little reviews of a candidate's performance and send the review by email or whatever to the candidate's manager. I think that's a little unusual.
And you're absolutely right. I ran into Mike McCurry 2 nights ago, who was Bill Clinton's press secretary, who I like a great deal. I like him a lot. I was happy to see him. So you may be friendly with people. What you don't do is identify with them. You don't feel like you're on the same side. You're on the opposite side. You're in a contentious relationship by its definition.
Right.
They're the politicians or their aides. You're the press. It's Wile E. Coyote versus the Roadrunner.
Yeah.
And it has to be.
It's arm's length at least.
It has to be. And the problem is they're all in the same soup culturally. It turns out that your average New York Times reporter has a lot more in common with your average presidential candidate than he has with your average voter. You know, that's a huge problem.
I remember I would be sitting up in the Senate gallery, and you'd see these ferocious debates happen on the Senate floor in the days when I was covering Congress. And then sometimes you'd see the two members that have just been at each other's throats walking out of the chamber with their arms around each other. And I thought that was, in a way, kind of a nice thing that they got along personally. But I remember I said to one reporter one time I was talking to, but he said, look at them. I said, look, no matter what you think, those guys down there, men and women down on that floor, they're a lot closer to each other than they are to any of us.
They're on the same side.
That used to be true.
And in some sense, it's true in that they have a shared interest. But the backdrop of all of this is the press keeps them honest. We're here on behalf of our readers and viewers. And if we forget that and we start to believe that really we're on the same side of the people we cover, and not just politicians, but heads of large companies or Hollywood or anybody with power, we should be a backstop against their overreach.
Do you think this is a consequence of a bias that we've all recognized that occurs with these journalists toward the party they favor, whose ideas they favor, and that they don't really recognize that they have the bias, and they cause them to slide into these peculiar relationships?
I think that's part of it. I mean, journalists are liberal overwhelmingly, but they always have been, and it hasn't always been this way. I think it's a cultural affinity is the problem. I think everyone in the political class is from the same background as everyone in the press. They all went to the same schools. They have the same cultural assumptions. They're basically the same people who just took different paths. It used to be the press was comprised primarily of working class people. It was a trade. And so they didn't actually have that much in common with the people running the country. And that was good. Maybe we should get back to that.
Wait. But that's what people complain about the elites in the press corps. Tucker, thanks very much.
Thank you, Brett.